Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello, everybody. This is Walt Hochel. We'll give another 5 minutes or so. People are still joining, and so we'll start at 8:05 if that's okay. Good to see you all.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening to everyone.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening, Arjun.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. We're starting at 8:05 if that's okay. Just people are still coming online.
Good evening. Amen.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening.
Well, we have 107 people online. People are still joining, 110. I think that we should go ahead and start. There have been a few changes to the agenda due to changing commitments on the part of the State Department personnel. So we'll be flexible. Let's see if I can. So this is our current agenda. Welcome to the second mini course. The focus today will be on U.S. Graduate education system. And before we do that, we have some opening remarks and information by various people. The first person that will speak is Magda Magradze, the Chief Executive Officer of the Millennium Corporation. Welcome, Magda, and thank you again for attending and your support.
Good evening and good morning, dear colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Rochelle. It is my great pleasure to welcome our today's participants and speakers. It is very impressive to see that there are 117 or 18 participants already who expressed their interest to participate in our today's workshop on supporting STEM research and graduate education. I would like to, first of all, thank the U.S. Department of State and U.S. Embassy for supporting San Diego State University with a grant to organize a series of workshops and professional development activities that is supporting STEM education in Georgia. As you know, San Diego State University has been a partner of Georgia since 2014. Together with the Millennium Foundation or Millennium Challenge Corporation of the US government, we have been implementing very important undergraduate programs in STEM education with Georgia's 3 largest public universities. These are the Georgia Technical University, Ilia State University, and Tbilisi State University. And I'm very glad to see that San Diego State University is committed and interested to continue its partnership with Georgia beyond the MCC Compact and MCC Grant. And our today's gathering is a good evidence of the latter. A series of workshops that are being organized by San Diego State University are held online. Originally, the plan was to organize visits of San Diego State University professors to Georgia, but considering the pandemic, a shift was made. And I believe that the online workshops are as successful and useful as the face-to-face interaction would have been. So I would like to thank San Diego State University team, Dr. Oshel, Dr. Goovan, also thank SDSU Georgia's team, and thank my colleagues at Millennium Foundation for organizing this series of workshops. And of course, thank all the participants who are here today, and our deepest gratitude to the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. Department of State for their continuous support of higher education and overall education sector in Georgia. Thank you, dear colleagues, and I wish you a successful workshop today.
Magda, thank you very much for that introduction and context. It was great. And thank you again for all of your support of the program and STEM education in Georgia. The next speaker is Mr. Christopher Anderson from the U.S. Embassy, the new cultural attaché. He spoke to us last time, and I think we'll make some comments about the visa situation now for the U.S. and some general comments. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Thank you very much for having me again. It's great to be back. And I do want to wish everyone a happy holiday season. I know this is a really challenging time for everyone. Here in Georgia, the COVID situation is getting is difficult. And so I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy. But I also want to say we're happy we can keep these virtual activities up. And I think it's really important that we keep moving forward on some of these issues. STEM education, as I mentioned last time, is a real priority for the U.S. government and the embassy in particular. And we do believe that this will have supporting these programs will have a dramatic impact on Georgia's economic future and on the future of its people. So I wanted to provide a little more granular detail about how the U.S. Embassy supports studying in the U.S. So, of course, we work with Education USA, who is our partner. I think they're speaking with you later today, and they will talk about how they work to build links between U.S. organizations and Georgian students. And they are a great resource when it's not locked down. You can go into their office and they'll help do consultations. They'll provide you details and information about different universities and programs and things like that. But they can also help online and with virtual consultations and with the visa process, the TOEFL process, all of that stuff.
Chris, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen.
We can hear you, Chris.
I think Chris may be restarting. We will. Wait a second.
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes, but you're sideways, but that's fine.
All
You're
right,
on your, there you go. Now you're upright.
So as I was saying, so first, in case you got cut out, talk to Education USA. They are a great partner for helping identify specific programs. And that is primarily if you want to go the private route for studying in the United States. We also have a whole series of different exchanges which you can use. And these are two different vehicles, and they're represented also in the types of visa you apply for. If you apply directly, you go with an F visa. If you're doing it through an exchange program, an official exchange program, it's a J visa. And so what do I mean by the exchange programs? I'm talking about Fulbright, Humphrey, those kinds of programs where you apply through the embassy for one of these grants. You get reviewed by a committee, and then the U.S. government will pay a significant portion, if not all, of your study in the U.S., including travel costs and things like that. So those are very important. There's a couple that are relevant. You have undergraduate programs, no longer relevant for you guys, but we have the graduate student programs. That's the classic Fulbright graduate program. We don't really have any PhD programs because most PhD programs have funding associated with them. So you have the master's or graduate degree programs with the Fulbright graduate student program, but then you also have something called the Fulbright Visiting Scholars Program. And that is for people who have already completed their degree and have a PhD from Georgia or a master's degree from a US or European university and want to go study in the US for 3 to 6 months. There's also a Fulbright faculty development program for people who are working in universities and want to improve their curriculum or improve their research. And then we also have a few other specialized programs for studying in institutes within the United States or for professionals, mid-career professionals, and that's called the Humphrey program. So the Humphrey Fellows. So those are different exchange programs that you do. But of course, there's always the private route. You can apply to universities directly. You don't need to go to the embassy. You can contact the university directly and they will help, and they can help bring you to the United States. And what I would note is some of these universities will actually provide scholarships as well. So I know the US universities are expensive, but don't be put off. Even if you don't qualify for a US government exchange, there are ways of paying for it within the United States through scholarships and things like that. Education, our partner Education USA can tell you more about those. But now I want to talk to you a little bit about the visas. I know the visa system is confusing, but the key takeaway is if you are applying for the schools, if you're going through the exchange program, then it's going to be a lot simpler because the US government will help you and will take care of the process. You still have to go and apply, but most of it's easier. That's the J visas. If you're going privately, applying to a private university, you have to apply for an F visa, a student visa, and the university will sponsor you. They will help prepare the paperwork and they will mail you the form needed to go to the embassy to apply. It's really not that complicated. You just have to show that you have ties back here, you have family or something else, and you have the means to pay for school and that it's a credible program. And then it's a pretty straightforward program, especially if you're going for a credible, graduate or something like that degree. The challenge that people have is when they say, I'm going to go study English in the United States and they plan to stay there for a year and they have no source of income and they, that's basically they want to go work while pretending to study. So if you're going for a major, a real graduate degree program, like any of you would be looking to do, the visa process, either the university or the US government will help you depending on the nature of your program. So I think that covers the key topics unless there's anything else you want me to touch on.
Chris, is there anything that you can say now about the situation with visas? I assume everything is on hold with COVID.
Yes. Yeah, in terms of COVID, yes. The only visas we're issuing at the moment are emergency visas because we are in a, we have issued a travel advisory. But I also think if you are, if you are going if there's anyone going for the semester, just reach out to the consular section. You can request an appointment, let them know that, if you don't travel now, you'll miss your studies and that would be a hardship. So it just requires a little bit more effort to schedule, but we really do prioritize student visas and we really want to make sure that you get to go and study in the United States. So if anyone is going to US to study this next semester and doesn't have a visa yet, reach out to the embassy, check our Facebook page or our website, and you'll see there's a consular section email them. They should respond in a day or two and say, I need an appointment because I have studies. I have to go back to the United States or I have to go to the US for studies. And I am pretty sure the embassy will facilitate that.
Great. Chris, thank you very much. We'll have questions at the end of all the presentations. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat session, and Dr. Nodar Surgaludsi will gather the questions and we'll ask them to the various speakers at the end. Chris, I don't know if you'll still be available then, but we can send them to you if you're not.
Okay, yes.
Great.
Yeah, I was going to duck out, but if you do have questions that Dolly doesn't answer because she's been doing this for a long time as well, let me know and I'll circle back and answer either next time we do this or through email or something like that. So
Great. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Dr. Halil Goovan, the Dean of SDSU Georgia. Halil?
Yes, welcome all the Georgian colleagues, including our good friend, Director of Georgian Technical University, David Gurganidze, and Christopher and Magda. We're very happy to be part of this second mini-series, mini course. Today, I'm talking to you not as just the Dean of SDSU in Georgia, but also as a Fulbright scholar. Some 41 years ago, I was a Fulbright scholar that applied to U.S. Embassy in Cyprus, where I got a scholarship and went to the States. So, I can vouch for the benefits of the program, and I hope that many of you get a chance to benefit from it. Tonight we have Dean of Graduate Studies in San Diego at Walston. I would like to thank him for being part of this, as well as thanking our friends at Center for International Education, Cinceladze with us, and as well as Dali Homeriki, who are Education USA. So in trying to search for schools, finding schools and connecting with schools and applying for studies in the United States, they can be helpful. And if you want us to connect you with them, we'll be happy to do so. SDSU Georgia office can provide a bridge function. So if you have any research ideas in STEM, it doesn't have to be in the areas that only SDSU Georgia is operating. It can be in other areas as well. Please feel free to contact our office. Anna Tonikiani is the person in the office that will facilitate, so we can direct you either to Education USA, or we can also maybe direct you to the main campus as well as U.S. Embassy. So I wish a productive mini course today, and I want to thank you again for joining us for tonight's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Halil. And Halil is also co-PI on this State Department grant and program that we're here tonight about. Also, I should say that if you have any questions about education in the U.S. and particularly at SDSU, one of your best contacts is SDSU Georgia, and they're they know San Diego State, of course, because they are San Diego State, but also the visa situation, are happy to help in any way they can, and also make connections. So thank you again for attending. We're up to 143 participants, which is very good to see. Of course, we've had to make a lot of changes due to COVID, and going from, as Halil said, from face-to-face to this virtual format is one of them, but I think it's working very well, and maybe where our attendance is even better than if it was face-to-face. The other thing is we're making other adjustments. One of the key parts of this program is to support students to work on their Georgian PhDs at San Diego State for a period of 6 months to 2 years. And we still want to do that when we can get visas and when COVID permits. But in the meantime, our professors are supporting students in Georgia working on their PhDs in Georgia. So if you want to pursue that possibility or know more about it, we'll be talking more about it later, but Halil or I can give you information. So I really appreciate your attendance and the support and attendance of the State Department and the Ministry of Education Georgia and Millennium Corporation. The enthusiasm and support for increasing the STEM research and graduate capacity in Georgia has been phenomenal, and I really appreciate everybody's input. With that, I will introduce our Interim Dean of Graduate Studies, Ed Walston. Ed has acted as Associate Dean of Graduate Studies and Research for a number of years, and now is Interim Dean of Graduate Studies. Ed is an economist. He's actually one of the good economists. He deals with the real costs of economic development and full cost accounting of economic development and economic projects, and looking at sort of the full range of externalities that need to be considered. So not only has he been a fantastic dean of graduate studies, but he's a really good and useful economist that is very attuned to the natural resources, ecology, and sustainability. So with that, Ed's going to be talking today on the US system of graduate programs and also some specifics about opportunities and programs at SDSU. Ed?
Thank you, Dr. O'Shell, and good evening to everybody, and good morning to maybe just a couple of you. I've been really looking forward to this, and it's really good to see a lot of young people in Zoom, because this talk really is aimed at you. After talking with Dr. O'Shell and Dean Goovan, I really did not share the right screen. We really have organized this talk around what I'm calling a primer on STEM PhD programs in the United States. Now, we will depart from that at times and talk about the role of master's programs as a bridge to PhD programs in certain circumstances, and a broader picture of universities that offer graduate programs in the United States. But the focus will be on, I think, the audience intended here is prospective PhD programs in STEM fields in the United States. So that's what we're here for. And here's a basic outline of what I thought I would talk about today. So the first is what will literally be a 100,000-foot view of the landscape of US universities that offer graduate programs. The first thing that you will notice is that that landscape is vast. There's really a remarkable number of good universities that offer quality graduate programs across the United States. In fact, in all 50 states. I think it's worth spending time talking about the admissions process. There's quite a lot that you can say about how PhD program admissions work that applies really to any American university. And then there are some subtleties, some differences depending on the field that we'll get into. As we've already talked about this hour, a crucial piece of studying in the United States is funding. It's not just how much of it, but what the source of that funding is, what sort of work is required as part of that funding. And yes, American universities do have tuition. So how you manage to cover tuition, who and for how long are really crucial things to consider before deciding to move to get one of those F1 visas and come to the United States. So we'll spend a good amount of time about funding, as well as features of US PhD programs in terms of their structure. And there are some differences in the way US PhD programs work and how long it takes to complete one compared to programs in the UK or other parts of the English-speaking world or in Europe. So we will dedicate some time to talking about how those programs work. I have some advice, I think, for any prospective student who down the road gets to the point perhaps where they're deciding which universities to send applications to, and then ultimately with options, with multiple opportunities, how you identify the right program for you when it comes to PhD studies. I don't have very much to tell you about visa and immigration, and that's because I'm fully aware that the embassy staff knows far more about this than I do. There are a couple of notes on this, and I can answer questions as best I can. And then as Dr. O'Shell mentioned, we're going to make a somewhat shameless advertisement toward the end of this talk for programs at San Diego State. And that goes for our PhD programs in STEM fields, as well as I have some information about master's programs in San Diego that have been used historically very effectively by students for a long time as a stepping stone to PhD programs. So much of what I'll say, I think, would apply to PhD programs in nearly any field, but I recognize I know what the majors offered at SDSU Georgia are, and that this audience is primarily interested in STEM programs. And we don't need to spend much time talking about the boundaries or the definitions of STEM. Walt mentioned that I'm an economist, and we have this, well, we've long wondered whether we're in or out of STEM by definition. I think it depends who you're asking, and in the end, it doesn't matter very much. So we should get started. Now, when I say that the landscape is vast, there's a neat map. This is the National Center for Education Statistics. The U.S. Department of Education has a filter, a system, and some visuals for how you think about programs in the United States. This is really the 10-cent tour. What I've filtered here are U.S. institutions that offer graduate programs. That includes master's programs. I couldn't figure out how to filter out master's programs and just look at PhD granting institutions. It's over 1,000 universities in the United States that offer graduate programs. Obviously, we will get into this, but some differences in history and perceived quality, availability of funding. So starting in the upper Midwest, the Public University of Illinois, the private University of Chicago, Michigan State, right here by Ann Arbor is the University of Michigan. The density is really what I think I'm trying to impress upon you here. The number of universities offering graduate programs, quality graduate programs in the United States is truly amazing. The density in the Northeast of the United States is the greatest. Of course, all of the Ivy League universities like the University of Pennsylvania are in the northeastern part of the United States. It's the most densely populated part. It's the oldest part of the United States. And so many of the traditional, very, very high reputation universities in the United States are there. We are gonna, I think, not even be able to read the name of the city of Boston because it is obscured by so many dots, of extraordinarily high density of universities in that city, but hardly the only place that you can come to the United States and find excellent STEM graduate programs. The Mid-Atlantic, this region here is called the Research Triangle because I think we're going to see North Carolina State is there, but so is the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and Duke University. They're all within a short distance of one another. Florida is, of course, a very highly densely populated state with a number of very large public universities offering quality programs. The University of Texas public university system is famously excellent as well. Through the Southwest, programs in New Mexico, Arizona. Now we're to the West Coast. There's a very fine institution there called San Diego State. The University of California, San Diego is just up the coast, 18 minutes away. Of course, Los Angeles is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the US, and there's a huge number of universities, most prominently the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, with a full complement of very high quality programs. Up the coast of California, UC Santa Barbara is my alma mater. If there are any Millennium Challenge Corporation folks on the line still, a classmate of mine in my economics PhD program was John Wingle, longtime MCC leader. Stanford and the density of the San Francisco Bay Area. I promise we're almost done here. We reach up the coast. The Western states often have sort of one or two flagship public universities, not the same density as the Northeast or the Mid-Atlantic. There's the University of Oregon, for example, and finally, an excellent public university in Seattle, the University of Washington. So the first thing to point out, I guess I've maybe overmade the point, is that there are a huge number of institutions worth considering study in the United States. You will sometimes hear there are over 4,000 colleges and universities in the United States. I think that's an inflated number that includes two-year colleges, community colleges, and so on. There are, as I said, over 1,000 that offer post-baccalaureate degrees. This really means master's and doctoral programs, master's or doctoral programs. And getting down to the number that's really more relevant when we talk about pursuing research doctoral study in the United States, about 319 institutions that offer them. There is a classification system, or there's certainly more than one classification system, but one that we refer to frequently. Of those 319, 115 are classified by the Carnegie Foundation, and that is used sort of broadly as having the highest, very high level of research activity. Another 104 institutions are regarded as high level of research activity. And then there are 100 of these 319 institutions that offer doctoral degrees, offer research doctorates, but are not classified as having high levels of research activity. Does anybody know, are these red lines appearing for everybody else? Okay, what, am I doing that? Or,
I assume you are, but I don't know.
so I don't think I am. I think,
It's your screen.
yeah,
I don't know.
it
It's okay.
doesn't seem like something I could be doing.
Not a problem.
All right. And then a classification, a distinction drawn earlier by Chris Anderson, these 319 universities that we're really talking about as the landscape for programs that you would potentially pursue. 193 of them are public universities, which in our vocabulary means that they rely significantly on state level support and historical investments in the university. Public universities have somewhat lower tuition, and they are important parts of state government in the United States. And then private institutions have no such state funding, and as a consequence, the tuition charge at those places is significantly higher, and sometimes startlingly high, as in $50,000 per year and so on. I've put an asterisk next to this to make a note that we will return to this distinction. It turns out that for PhD students, the distinction between public and private universities is often not as important as you might expect. And the reason, as we'll see, is that a tuition coverage, funding for tuition, should be part of a PhD student's package of financial support. A PhD student in these fields, maybe in particular, should not be paying tuition, whether it's at a public or a private university. And so the distinction between public and private universities for the purposes of, say, thinking about what type of program you will attend is not as important as it might initially seem. Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know where those red lines are coming from.
No, I don't either, Ed, but I don't think it's causing a problem, so we'll just ignore them.
All right. Okay, these numbers are from 2019, and we are aware that 2020 has been a very different kind of experience. And so these numbers don't reflect maybe exactly what's happening at the moment, but this is the picture that we will return to. And it's an inspiring one from my perspective. There are 378,000 international students enrolled in US graduate programs in a given academic year. That's from 2019. There are another 223,000 international students who are on OPT, optional practical training, which is follow on from graduation of a graduate program. Another asterisk here because I want to come back to talk about OPT a little bit later. And the bigger picture, the broad picture here is that for many years, for generations, graduate education has been a US export. And as an economist, I actually think about that literally. In some ways, people coming to the United States, whether for tourism or for study, is an actual export of one of our key areas of comparative advantage. And it's also clearly been a vital path for immigration for a long time. And nowhere can you see that more clearly than when you work at a university and you see the faculty that staff these universities. They're from all over the world, and it increases the vibrancy and the quality of the work. That diversity, of course, adds to the quality of the projects. And in my view, this is the most important part of the story. Foreign students coming to the United States to study is not a favor that the US does for those students. It is of enormous consequence and value to American universities and to American society. These numbers come from that URL at the bottom of the page. Okay, so I said I wanted to spend a good portion of this time on admissions. And the admissions process is is somewhat formalized. There's no casual way to gain admission to a PhD program in the United States. You have to submit a formal application. They're all online these days. The key inputs, of course, are your transcripts from any post-secondary work, your transcripts from SDSU Georgia, for example, letters of recommendation, ideally from faculty who can speak to your potential as well as your experience to date, your potential as a researcher, and as ultimately a contributor to your discipline. The personal statement will vary across different types of institutions. They may give you prompts asking you specific questions to speak to certain things, and others would be more open for you to tell your story, explaining why you want to pursue this career path, why you want to pursue it in that program specifically. And it's the best opportunity for you to demonstrate that you understand what you're getting into, right? The personal statement in PhD program admissions is often a window on applicants who aren't really aware of what they what they say they're signing up for. Now, here's a significant change, something that's worth spending a couple of minutes talking about. Some programs today will require official scores from, say, the graduate record exam, the GRE. Now, this, not long ago, was a universal requirement. Right? Every program, certainly in STEM, would require GRE scores. And this, in some ways, worked to the advantage of international students who often have quite strong, secondary and post-secondary training in mathematics. And the quantitative GRE score is an opportunity to demonstrate some real academic strength. What's happened in recent years at US institutions is a loss of faith in the GRE, essentially. Some concern that it doesn't measure exactly what it purports to measure, and perhaps that it discriminates against students who haven't followed a traditional path through to college and now to pursue graduate study. COVID this year, 2020, has really accelerated the reduced reliance on the GRE. San Diego State's one of, I think, countless universities that suspended the use of the GRE for graduate admissions this year, in part certainly motivated by concerns that it may not be safe to go to the testing site and complete the exam. And online from home GRE exams aren't really trusted yet. And so we've just suspended their use. But the real truth is that there's a lot of skepticism about use of the GRE prior to 2020 that the events of this year have only accelerated. And I'm unsure if you are applying to these kinds of programs 2 years from now, whether you will see that the GRE is required or not. I'm expecting that its use will be greatly diminished. So then the question really is, what makes for a strong application? Yes, international students do need to demonstrate English proficiency. The TOEFL exam is one way to do that, but my understanding, and any one of you could correct me if this is wrong, because the language of instruction at SDSU Georgia is in English, that a degree from SDSU Georgia is an alternative certification of English proficiency. We would not be required to take the TOEFL with a degree from a university where the instruction was in English.
Correct. That's correct.
Ed, do you want to try stopping sharing your screen and restart and seeing if that makes the red go away?
I think it may have worked.
But we don't see your screen now.
You have to share again, yeah.
But they went off. Okay.
Great. Perfect.
So Walt, the great scientist, says, turn it off and turn it back on again. That usually works.
It usually does. Actually, it was Halil's suggestion, but.
Okay, so without the GRE, maybe in particular, which is a greatly reduced element of admissions in my expectation, the key things for a strong application are previous coursework. So for a program that you're applying to, does your baccalaureate coursework or other post-secondary coursework, does it appear to be rigorous, the appropriate level for preparation for the program to which you're applying? And then of course, high grades or high marks are desirable. It can be challenging for American universities to interpret the grading scales from foreign transcripts. I perceive that is not the issue, won't be the issue for students with transcripts from SDSU Georgia. The absence of the GRE.
I should say that we're talking to several dozen universities in Georgia and partners for SDSU Georgia. So it's this is of general interest to students in Georgia, not just in SDSU Georgia.
Right, and that goes for my last 2 points about SDSU Georgia, where the language of instruction is not English. The TOEFL is required for really any U.S. university to demonstrate English proficiency, and the issues about interpreting grades and marks is significant. Being able to project relative ranks within your graduating cohort or other ways to frame your transcripts, grades, or marks is important. Now, without standardized exam scores, my sense is that the letters of recommendation and a personal statement of application will be more important. And you're trying to accomplish two things with these documents. The first is a clear indication that you understand what you're getting into, that you understand what's ahead, that you have a scientist's curiosity, that you are reliable and mature, that someone taking you into their research group will be able to count on you. And that's a big part of what happens at universities. The high GRE score does not predict reliability and maturity, famously. And that's part of the reason I think it's lost some of its luster. So the understanding what a committee that's reviewing both letters of recommendation, and this is more pitched to people who support students who aspire to PhD programs in the United States, and for them in the personal statement. I think what admissions committees are looking for Are those things first, and then evidence of preparation that's not clear from a transcript? And the one that's become much more important and common enough so that its absence is sort of a point against an applicant is research experience. So undergraduates having some fundamental and authentic experience in research is I now believe a very important element to a successful application. The terminology we've started to use is REU, which is research experience for undergraduates, or research experience as an undergraduate. What it means is actual hands-on experience in an authentic research project, not a course research, not in the curriculum. Let's have students pretend to do research projects, but something where you're actually contributing to a group pursuing new knowledge. So research experience is certainly part of this answer, what makes for a strong application. And then to the extent that those high GRE scores are still going to be helpful, if GRE scores aren't required, but you can take the exam and submit a 95, 95th percentile quantitative score to an engineering program, I think that is still an open question. So we're grappling with this at SDSU. I'm certain that other universities are as well. If the GRE isn't required, can scores be submitted voluntarily? And I don't know what experience, I can't project really what's going to happen down the road next year, the year after, and beyond, whether universities will say, we cannot consider the GRE, don't send us scores, we won't look at them, we won't use them, or whether in practice, a very high GRE score will be factored in because once the information is known, it's hard to unknow it, right? And a very high score has traditionally certainly caught the attention of a good number of faculty who do admissions for these programs. This is the part I think we don't know yet, is if the GRE is going to become less commonly required, how will they be treated when voluntarily submitted? Okay, and then there is a feature of, it's common in STEM programs, but cannot be described as universal. In many programs, you are admitted and identified with a primary faculty mentor from the beginning. And in fact, the admissions process is tied together with an individual faculty member's commitment to support you financially and to incorporate you into their lab or research group. And just as important as any of those other factors, when a program does admissions in this way, is for you to make that compelling case that you're a fit with that professor's scholarly work, the work that they're interested in doing in the future, and that you fit in with their existing research personnel, other PhD students, other students, postdocs, faculty collaborators. So this is in programs that operate in this way, where the primary faculty mentor is essentially the one who decides to admit you and package financial support for you. I understand this to be as important as anything else. Now, this is not universally the case in some programs, even in STEM and more commonly outside of STEM. That relationship between a PhD student and their key primary faculty mentor is only established after a year or more in the program. And that could come after performance in coursework, evolving interests, and actually having an opportunity to speak with this prospective student, this professor. And sometimes that's formalized in the way that students will rotate through different labs or research groups prior to that established relationship between student and the person who will be the chair of their dissertation and the person who will support them financially and be that key relationship, that primary mentor we'll have more to talk about that relationship here in a bit too. So as far as admissions, the most important thing for any program you're applying to is to understand which type you are applying to, right? Is this a program where you will need to persuade a specific faculty member to agree to work with you, or is this a program where you're applying based on your general qualifications and interests, and that relationship will be established after a period of time at the beginning of the program? All right, and that does segue to funding. And as Chris Anderson said, with PhD students in research doctorate programs, the funding is an expectation and a key feature of the entire arrangement. So the questions you have going in evaluating a program, first of all, whether you would apply to it, and then if admitted, attend. How will you be supported financially, and what may you be required to actually pay for? And the point that I made earlier, it should be a very rare and unusual circumstance if a student in one of these PhD programs is paying for tuition out of their own pocket, out of their own stipend. Now, there are qualifiers to that statement, because I didn't want to make it too strong. Otherwise, Dr. Rochelle would come back next week and say, you said that PhD students should never have to pay for tuition. In rare circumstances, some of which we'll outline here, there can be exceptions, and you should be aware of them and warned about them. So tuition should be covered by the institution through arrangements like, for example, a graduate dean's office, the college dean. The program may have budget specifically for paying or waiving tuition for students in the program. Other times, tuition will be a budget item in a research grant or what's called a training grant. When students are supported on fellowships, the fellowship will often have a budget to cover tuition. The point is that the student shouldn't be paying tuition out of their own stipend funds or out of their own pocket. And here's the point we've returned to now, my asterisk about public and private universities. Whether the sticker price for Stanford at $50,000 or for a public university at closer to, say, $15,000 shouldn't matter very much in terms of which type of program you want to attend, as long as tuition is being covered by other sources. And now, things to be aware of: there may still be fees that students are asked to pay for. And presumably some of these will be small. The universities will have a $100 document fee that covers the cost of any future official transcripts that you ask to have sent to employers or other institutions, the printing of your diploma. I think it's still common that PhD students have to pay for those kinds of things out of their own pocket. But that's $100 is one thing. Being asked to pay large campus fees each semester is something that you just need to know to understand the full package of your funding support. And we'll get back, I think, to this. It's really important to ask the questions when you're evaluating what type of program to attend, to understand these kinds of subtleties, not be surprised by them only after you arrive and discover that there's a health fee and there's other fees that you may have to pay $500 per term. That's not something you'd want to learn only after accepting admission and moving to that city. And then institutions, graduate dean's offices often have this as a matter of actual policy, but PhD programs will often have a time limit on financial support. And that can, I think 6 years is the most likely expectation, that if you have not graduated after 6 years, that tuition coverage could expire. And that's a bad situation. That's the one that you want to know is a possibility well ahead so that you make sure that you don't get there, that it doesn't, it's not a relevant question because you graduated in good time to degree and did not have any threats of having financial support removed. But I don't think it'll sound surprising that something as substantial as an offer to cover tuition for a student is not forever. It does expire. All right, and then beyond tuition, the big part of whether the funding provided to a PhD student is adequate or not is the salary or stipend that they receive for living expenses. Probably the first question is how much, but right behind how much, what is the monthly check that you receive, is what is the source of that salary or stipend. And there are a number of possible answers to that, and it's important to know which we're talking about. So in STEM programs, it is common for a student's salary, their stipend for living expenses comes from a research grant. Their employment on a specific project, a grant, or a contract. There are, however, other things that wind up supporting students in these programs. Institutional fellowships. So research universities have fellowships that are from the university's own funds that are used to support students in lieu of employment on a research grant, or as we'll see, employment in teaching positions or other kinds of external funding. So employment, research employment, fellowship, either from the university or from outside the university, and employment in teaching positions. The difference between these sources of your kind of living expenses is really important. Even if the money that you're taking home is similar, they're not the same. These are not equivalent sources of financial support. And the questions to consider are, what work are you being required to undertake in order to earn this salary? In the case of fellowships, the answer is often none. Right? That your role when you're on a fellowship is to make maximum progress toward your degree. Right? If you're the dissertation writing stage, that means working almost exclusively on the research projects that are the foundation of your dissertation. For employment on research grants or contracts, it could be that the work toward your own degree, toward a dissertation and completing the program, and the work on the research grant or contract are so closely related that you are on campus doing both of those things at the same time, and it's a good arrangement. You're being paid to do work that's also leading toward the dissertation. But that is not a guaranteed situation, right? In many fields, the work that earns salary, that earns the stipend from a contract or grant is not that closely related to what the student needs to complete their degree. And that's a less ideal situation, obviously. And then teaching positions, there is an element of teaching that is an important part of a student's training, a PhD student's training, and that goes for whether they will have a future in academics, whether they'll have teaching responsibilities. And it also, I think, is valuable training for those who will not, right? Careers outside of academics, teaching experience still winds up being a good training. But you don't need that much teaching experience in order to gain that training. And what would be unusual in a quality STEM program, but is not unusual in social sciences or humanities at all, is for students to teach essentially every year, every term throughout their program. And that makes completing a PhD a lot more difficult than if their funding is from a fellowship or from research grants or contracts that are closely aligned with their own dissertation work. So that's a very important thing to try to understand, is what's the nature of the work, if any, and programs that offer a number of years on fellowship support really the best. There are some real variations in what PhD students get paid. And even within STEM, there's variation across academic disciplines. It's not the case that every PhD student, at the University of North Carolina gets paid the same. It's just not true. There are higher paying fields. Famously, I think the highest are engineering, kind of cell and molecular biology, chemistry. And the variation comes probably first from the plain availability of more external funding. There's more money to pay PhD students on larger grants than on smaller grants, and certainly in fields where there is no grant money and we're relying on institutional or teaching sources. But there's also a market element, and the economist can't avoid thinking about it this way, and I'll try to explain what I mean. And we want to come back to this, I think, again, in thinking about deciding on the right program for you. This is a two-way recruitment, right? The work that PhD programs are offering to PhD students, is not just their generosity. The work that PhD students is absolutely essential for the research enterprise at these institutions and in these programs. And better PhD students are more productive and support that research enterprise better. And those programs will pay a premium for them. And that's just sort of the way labor markets work. Now, this is a highly distorted labor market because there's, especially at a public university where there are a lot of rules, but you will see that certain disciplines have somewhat higher stipend levels than others. What I think you should be at this moment in time, these numbers obviously will change, and this presentation will someday look badly out of date, but it's not unreasonable to expect to live on $25,000 for a year per year in a quality STEM program, and in the higher paying fields, I think it could be $35,000 and even and more. Now, the other sort of economic question about this is, okay, $25,000 or $35,000. What is that? How does that allow one to live in the United States? And there's a plain fact here that there might be variation in what PhD students get paid in different parts of the United States. In more expensive urban areas, they may need to be compensated more than in lower cost, right, where rent for an apartment is cheaper in rural areas or smaller cities. But the variation is not as great as you might expect. The variation across disciplines is driven by market forces, but this is, it's not the case that you will be naturally compensated for the cost of living in your city. Attending graduate programs in an expensive place is still more expensive, and it's not going to be made up with your stipend, is my prediction. Now, there are trade-offs in living in different parts of the United States. If you are accustomed to life in an urban environment like Tbilisi, then an urban environment in the United States might sound preferable to you. It could be it could be quite the opposite. The United States is so vast, and the regions can be quite different in many ways, certainly not the least of which is climate, weather, but also cultural climate. There's no simple answer to what does it cost to live in the United States. A PhD student stipend is going to go a lot further in some parts of the US than in others. And that's just all there is to it. And this needs to be considered as you weigh different programs in different places. All right, now here's my note about structure. So we've talked about 6 years. It could be that after 6 years, financial support for a PhD student starts to be withdrawn. And that's a situation that you will want to avoid as much as possible. The normative time that we talk about PhD programs in STEM is typically 5 years. Now that's not a hard and fast rule. Obviously, some students will take a little bit longer. And an unusually, as I say, unusually well-prepared and industrious student may be able to finish one of these programs in 4. my understanding, my reading is that students completing a program like this in under 4 years is very rare. And this is a real difference between US programs, just observationally, and PhD programs in the UK or Europe, Australia, which can often be shorter than that. And so what we want to talk about for a moment is why that difference exists. Why is it that it takes students in US PhD programs, an absolute minimum of 4 years, and statistically more like 5 on average? Most of it is structure. So US programs have more coursework. There's variation in this as well, but 1 and even 2 years of required and elective coursework is not unusual. These programs will have some structure of qualifying exams after sometimes only 1 year, more often after 2, where to move on through the program, some proficiency in a set of objectives, right? Students have to demonstrate that they've learned what one is meant to learn in the first year or 2 of these programs through their coursework and through other activity. There is and should be a good amount of structure around dissertation proposals and defenses. And there's more attention in US programs, and I'm generalizing here, but I think it's a fair generalization. There's more attention in US PhD programs to what we call professional development or professional training. And that is to hit students with, say, workshops on grant writing, workshops on careers outside of academia. And this has evolved, over time. Well, that wasn't the one I wanted to talk about. This has evolved over time, this greater structure. My reading is that a lot of it is the influence of the US federal government, especially the National Science Foundation, that's put a lot of thought and effort into what are we doing when we train scientists and engineers? What do we need from them? And there's much more of a thought about workforce development. Okay, we need in the US, right, a huge number of well-trained scientists, engineers, and other experts with PhD level training. And we're going to make sure that these programs are strongly incentivized to see that training is made somewhat more uniform. So the additional structure seems to be designed to ensure consistency in training and career preparation. And this means moving away, but not all the way away, from a traditional apprenticeship model or view of what the relationship between a PhD student and their program and their primary faculty relationship is. The desired consistency of training overcomes the idea that you are trained by one individual faculty member to know what they know and to support their research, but also in some ways to have your career launched as a replicant of that faculty member. And so American programs have tried to move away from that, that sort of highly variable relationship-based training, faculty member, student. But the truth is, it's still there. This is still the most important relationship in a PhD program, easily. There are still very, crucial features of that apprenticeship model that exist in programs for all the effort that has been made to create structure and more consistency in the type and quality of training. The way we talk about this relationship sort of varies. There's kind of a whole vocabulary around it. Some programs refer to the faculty mentor or primary faculty mentor. You'll hear in some programs major professor. I think in my program, in my field, we just say this is my dissertation chair or my dissertation advisor. In fields that are driven by grant funding, this person will sometimes be called just the PI, the principal investigator, the the one who is responsible for delivering the work on large research grants. And so you'll hear PhD students saying, you know, so-and-so, Dr. Oshel is my PI. They all refer essentially to the same thing, okay, that crucial relationship between a PhD student and their most important faculty mentor. That's about as much as I'll say about how that relationship works. And the reason is, I don't think it's as consistent as people sometimes suggest. So there's you should go to these PhD comics if you're a prospective PhD student. There's wisdom in there, but it's overconfident wisdom in the way that it sort of depicts life as a PhD student in the United States. The truth is there's more variation than you know, outright consistency. This one is probably pretty consistent, and there's more comics. There's funnier ones, but this one hits at something that's sort of undeniable. The relationship between these two is enormously imbalanced, right? This one will spend very little time replying to the emails, while this guy is going to agonize over exactly how he writes emails to his major professor. But I think that there's not just variation in institutions, right? The culture of different universities is different, but across these academic disciplines, the nature of this mentor-mentee relationship isn't something that you can describe in one single way. Walt or Halil, how am I doing on time?
I think we're doing fine, Ed. We have only one speaker brief fairly quickly after you, and questions and answers, some of which are being answered online. So,
okay, I think I'll be able to wrap it up at 9:30 or close.
Yeah, if you need, you could go 9:45 or even 10 if necessary.
Okay.
Thanks.
Please use as much of your time as you can, because it's so interesting.
Oh, that's very reassuring. Thank you. All right, so this is I understand might sound a little down the road for someone who's beginning to explore the possibility of studying in the United States, but it's worth talking about because we've made it this far. What real considerations and thoughts go into selecting the program for you? And there's two stages to this. Which programs are worth even sending an application to? And then should you find yourself in that wonderful, fortunate situation of having choices, having admission to more than one program, how do you make this difficult and, you know, enormously consequential decision of which one to attend? And this, I had an asterisk next to the market forces that determine one's stipend, right? It's different across disciplines. It's at this point, you have to remember and recognize that this is a two-way courtship, right? That these programs need quality PhD students and are as motivated as you are to go to a high-quality program. And especially in those programs where that faculty and student relationship is established at admission, right? They are highly motivated to recruit good students. This is not, again, it's not something that they're doing out of generosity for you. It's an important two-way transaction, two-way relationship that you've established. So my second piece of advice about this one is, unless you have reasons to be really committed to doing research on a specific topic, if you have narrowed your research interests for deeply committed reasons, then there's nothing this advice won't apply to you. But otherwise, I really do encourage students at this point to remain open-minded about what type of research you will do as a graduate student and beyond, what type of research you will do at what sort of institution and with whom. I think that being too narrow in your interests can really make the process of finding the right program, but then selecting them much more difficult. And there's too many too many stories that I've heard over my career of people who went into a graduate program thinking that they would study one thing and wound up writing a dissertation about something quite different. And then even more stories about people who wrote a dissertation, launched their careers thinking they would do research in a certain area and wound up far from there in terms of their real interest in the contributions that they've made. So open-mindedness is my advice about selecting the right program. And then financial support. So we've made this point, and if we could go back a few slides, but you can refer to them later. When comparing offers of financial support, right, it does make sense if you have multiple offers from PhD programs, you might want to go to the one that's prepared to support you most generously, all else equal. But make sure that you're seeing the full context of financial support. To reiterate, what is the nature of the work required for that financial support? How much teaching is involved? How much work on research projects that may not be closely related to your own interests, what you plan to do, write a dissertation on? Keep an eye on those like fees that are not covered by the program or by your faculty member. What other costs might arise as part of this program? In research programs, you would expect that equipment and other research supplies would be covered by the program. Is that always the case? These are things that you want to have an understanding of in trying to evaluate that offer of financial support. There's an important feature of how many years this funding is guaranteed for. There are a number of institutions that are moving to a goal of guaranteeing 5 years of funding for all incoming PhD students. And if they can't guarantee that funding, then they won't admit more students. And if it's not guaranteed for 5 years, then all right, how many, right? A 1 year offer of financial support, even if it's generous, may not be as attractive as a multi-year guaranteed offer of funding. And the idea that your funding could unravel and not be available after just 2 or 3 years in the program is something to really be concerned about. It shouldn't happen at good institutions, but we know that it does. And then, of course, considering not just what type of place, what part of the United States, whether large city, smaller city, rural area suits you, but consider the cost of living in those places. There are some really, really expensive parts of the United States where a PhD student stipend, even a generous one, will still mean multiple roommates or an apartment that is small or in other ways, not that great. Now, living on a tight budget is a classic part of the experience of being a PhD student, but it can really vary across parts of the US. Now, for rankings, my advice is to certainly consider them and to become familiar with them, especially the rankings that evaluate PhD programs specifically. Rankings for universities like the US News and World Report, top universities, that's not very useful for this question. Individual PhD programs will be ranked against each other in the same fields. Those are the ones that might be useful, but I really discourage you from becoming an obsessive about the rankings or reading more into them than they really offer in terms of precision. So the National Research Council, which is a product of the US Academies of Science Engineering, produce very influential rankings of PhD programs. They're older now. They came out in 2010, and those rankings, there's a link to these rankings on the last page of this presentation. The data from these 2010 rankings are actually from 2005 and 2006. So not the most recent, but it was an influential set of rankings, mainly because they didn't establish precision that wasn't there fundamentally. So there's a range, and it's over 5 different criteria: the quality of students, quality of research in the program, reputation. Excuse me. What many of us appreciated about the NRC rankings was that they didn't fall into the sort of usual U.S. News and World Report rankings where you're looking at, well, this place is number 22 and this is number 24, so the 22 is obviously better. That's not the kind of precision that rankings can ever produce on this sort of subject matter, and the NRC rankings are better about that. Clearly we've already talked about different tiers of universities, and there are different tiers of universities. This will be closely related to the quality of the financial support and other features that you will find appealing. So I don't know that the rankings need to be a big part of your consideration. The better advice probably is to do what many of my colleagues all say that students should do at the point of admission, but none of us did at the time when we were there, right? Which is to actually get answers to all of your questions. The people who, once you've been admitted to a program, and even when you're an applicant, the director of that program, staff supporting the program, certainly if you have a major professor or faculty mentor who stepped forward to offer a place in their research group and financial support, those people should be able to answer your questions about any number of things. And I found online sort of we're not going to read these obviously, but a kind of a crowdsourced set of questions that graduate students wished they had asked at the start before deciding which program to attend. It's everything from fundamental things we've talked about. Hey, students don't pay tuition, right? They get a tuition waiver. What about financial support in the summer? What's the cost of living? Health insurance. Most universities in the United States will have health coverage as part of student fees, which should be covered as part of tuition support. But you have to understand the details of these things. Certainly paying out of pocket for health insurance premiums or for health care in the United States is a bad proposition. It's very expensive and it's complicated. Asking a faculty member that you are considering joining into a very intense relationship with, how's your mentoring style? How often do you meet with your students? This seems like a field scientist specific question. Are you gone a lot? How many students do you have? How long did it take your last 3 students to finish? I think answering those, having those questions answered for you prior to making these decisions is really important. Is there a question? All right, I wanted to get to San Diego State, and I did have this one slide on visas and immigration. I'm going to restate that I'm not the expert on this process, and that the embassy staff will be able to answer these questions best. My experience with this is that these are routine processes, at least they were until this year. And this year has been a nightmare for both international students who are already in the United States but those who were intending to begin programs in fall of 2020. This has just been an enormous disruption, and the majority of those have been deferred, and their institutions will offer them an opportunity to start in fall of 2021, when we presume we would be through the worst of this pandemic. It's been the most difficult year for all of these topics, in memory. And so our sympathies to you. This is not what anybody wanted. Okay, a shameless pitch for San Diego State's graduate programs, graduate studies at SDSU. In that classification system, SDSU is a doctoral granting institution with high level of research activity. That is shortened to Research 2. It is an elite institution in the sense that it is part of the top couple hundred institutions offering doctoral programs in terms of research. It is not part of the most elite group, but it is still a highly regarded institution as part of that classification. We offer 19 PhD programs. All of them are administered jointly with a partner university. And this is a very strange history and artifact of California state law, long-standing division of labor between the university systems that we are very frustrated by, actually. And the type of university that we are should, of course, be offering PhD programs independently, and that remains the goal of the administration at SDSU, and I think we have allies in the state of California, but there really is no reason that we would be compelled to run these PhD programs jointly. In some cases, we maybe would want to anyway, because the relationships are really very good, but not worth going into in much more detail, except California has some funny rules that require SDSU to run these PhD programs with a partner. And then we have 4 professional doctorate programs. These are doctorates, but not research doctorates, not PhDs. SDSU has a full landscape of master's programs, more than 70 fields. So depending on how you count the subspecialties in master's programs, these are 2, sometimes 3-year courses of study with a good amount of coursework and varying levels of research intensity. The long observation from faculty and certainly from graduate deans at San Diego State is that these research-oriented masters can be an excellent stepping stone to PhD programs. Somebody who doesn't have every bit of preparation, the research experience, the rigorous coursework to be qualified for a PhD program after their bachelor's degree, with a 2 or 3 year intensive research-focused master's program. Now they are, and their opportunities for PhD study are completely transformed. That we very much like to offer master's students. The drawback for international students from master's programs is that the financial support is weaker. There are TA positions and some employment on research grants for master's students at SDSU. In some programs, even those opportunities are limited. And crucially, tuition coverage is not provided to master's students in the way it is to PhD students. And I think that is something that you find at any institution in the US. Master's programs are extremely valuable for a certain type of student who needs more preparation for a PhD, but they're expensive. And that's a big problem. We have relatively low tuition at SDSU, actually quite low in the grand scheme of things. And we have some opportunities for financial support for master's students, but there's no denying that it's a difficult one financially. There's a link here to the full range of master's programs that we offer. And here's our inventory of doctoral programs. You'll see that the oldest of these doctoral programs go all the way back to, I'm going to see if that works again, to restart. We've been running some of these programs for more than 50 years. Why does that happen? Chemistry was established as a program with what was at the time a brand new University of California campus in San Diego, 1965. The program that Dr. O'Shell has directed and contributed to for a long time from 1969. So some of these programs are quite old, and then in recent years we've developed a number of additional programs, including 4 separate tracks in engineering, a geophysics program, and some health sciences programs, public health, a social work program in substance abuse, and then this computational science program is a interdisciplinary applied math program that has contributing faculty from engineering, from math, from biology, from chemistry. It's a computational methods and statistics program that's quite good. There's information about these programs on that same web link. This last column I should note is what determines whether that optional practical training option following a degree earned on an F1 visa is for 1 year or for 2. So STEM programs, you have a longer period following graduation to remain in the US with work authorization, prior to finding another source of work authorization, perhaps. And the 0-1s are whether they are coded in the federal government's system for classifying programs as STEM or not. There's one on here. This clinical psychology program actually should be STEM because it's become more of a neuroscience program. So that's our collection of doctoral programs. I've put some of the links that we've already had in the presentation and a couple of others on here for your information. I tried to steer clear of too much obvious stuff. There are actually a lot of great resources online for prospective PhD students from overseas. You have to filter through some nonsense, but I think that the information for somebody who wants to dig in and do some research is available. And I hope this has been useful, and I look forward to some questions and answers.
Great, Ed. Thank you very much. That was a very nice overview of programs and considerations to make in selecting a PhD program. People have been submitting questions online, continue to do that. As I said, Dr. Nodar Sirgaladze will package those and ask the speakers at the end. Their next speaker is Ms. Dolly Komariki with Education USA, and we'll talk about financial aid at the graduate level and graduate education support. Ms. Komariki?
Yes, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Dr. Oshel. Thank you very much, Dr. Walston. That has been a wonderful presentation, very comprehensive and very eye-opening in many regards for students who are seeking for graduate, especially the PhD studies. My name is Dali, as you said, and I'm representing Education USA in Georgia. Education USA is the US Department of State supported network operating in more than 175 countries. And we serve around 14 to 16 million students annually. And our major task is to help students navigate through this quite complex US higher educational system and help them, find the right fit. Also, our role is to help US higher educational institutions to kind of accomplish their internationalization goals, student recruitment goals in a number of the countries. And here we are based at the Center for International Education. It's a Georgian NGO which represents Education USA, has been active since 2006 and has more than 2,000 alumni of the programs who studied on scholarships and independent study in Europe, USA. So there's a vast experience of advisement of the students. However, I do represent the American side of it. And could you please enable my screen sharing, Anna? And while Dr. Boston talked about many aspects of it, also concerning the educational funding and things like that, I may be able to skip some of the slides just for the sake of time and also allowing more time for questions, okay? Let me start. All right, so our center is, let me make it bigger. The CIE, which is the authorized representative of Education USA, is in a number of the cities, Tbilisi, Batumi, Kutaisi, Tel Aviv, Haltzicha, that makes it accessible for students nationwide. So if we have students today beyond SDSU and even at SDSU, the national universities who are located in the cities, you can find Education USA and CIE centers and go there for the advisement. we would be happy to assist you. Let's start from the beginning. USA is interesting and very attractive country for the study, for any levels of the study. And just recent report from the Open Door states that it maintains its leadership in the world for 5th consecutive year, hosting over 1 million students. And even amid pandemic, where there have been, so many uncertainties, and of course, these uncertainties did not concern only the United States, but the whole world, it still maintained its leading role in hosting international students. One of the things that might be interesting to you is top 8 fields of study for international students. And there is no surprise we see such a high number of international students pursuing specifically STEM degrees. So 21% with engineering, 19% math and computer sciences, business and management, social sciences. And you know it well that some of the economics and business degrees have been reclassified to the STEM degrees because they also require a high level of research, data sciences, big data management, econometrics, and financial engineering kind of the things. And so altogether, it basically represents 52% of international students pursuing majors in STEM fields. And if you look at the whole number, it's only 5.5% of international students in the whole America, basically studying in the US. Now, probably you're interested how many Georgian students study in the US. And here's the figure, it's 640 students. It may seem low, but I assure you it's not low. And if we take our region at large, among 12 countries of the region, Georgia is still leading. Even Ukraine, which has about 2,000 students, if you calculate it per capita, Georgia is still leading with the number of the students it sends to the US to study. One of the things that will be interesting for you, this is the figures, just fresh figures basically came out a month ago, the Open Doors report. It says that about 29% of the Georgian students in the US are pursuing graduate degrees. And that has been 17% rise only from the past year. And therefore, we're doing really good. And we encourage all of the students who have that dream, do pursue it because there are definitely the opportunities. Now, you would be interesting of all these 1 million students, who is funding those students? What are some of the sources of the funding? And then the Open Doors suggests that 60% of the international student funding comes from the international funding, which means that most of the students, especially from the large supplier countries like China, India, and others in the top 10, they provide a lot of family contributions to study in the US. And another important number, I mean, like Dr. Walston said, US has been a great exporter basically of its education. And so international students contributed about $45 billion to US economy. And basically, and that said, I mean, it's a really large kind of contribution. US universities amount to 40% funding, and mostly so it applies to PhDs, where definitely it's one of the most well-resourced, well-funded level of studies. And then 1% is other, could be private sponsors and things like that. Now, who gets more funding or what specializations? And there you can see that STEM fields, 82% are funded in the PhD programs, 55% in the STEM are master's level students. Humanities and social sciences get less funding, whether it's PhD or master students. And then there's a fewer, relatively lower funding in the programs like business, health, law, communications, and things like that. So I think that, since our audience today is quite STEM related, I think you should feel very encouraged to apply to either of the level that you are interested. Now, since our previous speaker covered most of the, most of the presentation about the doctoral degrees, I think we just do a refresher about the masters as well. Many students in Georgia, because the system is quite different, do not realize the difference between MA and MS degrees. So MA degrees would be Master of Arts, and that will be the students pursuing graduate degrees in humanities, or could be communications, public relations, political sciences, even economics, history, some parts of the psychology. And these are considered as terminal degrees. So students are not expected to continue their studies. They may go to the business, whatever, the job market and start working, and that has been basically the final degree. However, the MS students, Master of Sciences, that clearly covers the sciences. It's very rigorous on research, and therefore it will prepare students also for, transitioning to the doctoral degrees. Then there are some professional masters, probably we'll just skip that because I don't think it may be of the interest, and also some distinction between the doctoral degrees. Some students make equalizer between doctoral and PhDs. However, doctoral degrees also include some professional doctoral degrees where you don't need a thesis or you don't need a dissertation. It could be very professionally tiled, very applied, and it could be a capstone project. And therefore, it's very important for you to know these acronyms and also distinctions. When you look for the programs, look for the right one. Now, what would be the major kind of the highlights of the graduate education at the master's level? First, I think it's a good start for you to self-reflect, to kind of engage yourself in discussion with yourself. What level of education you need? Do you need master's or do you need PhD? At the master's level, not necessarily you continue your specialization. You can do something that is very interdisciplinary or something that is even quite different. And our US educational system does offer that kind of, diversity. Number of degrees not limited. You can do one master's and then do another one. You can do dual degree. You can do a combined master and PhD degrees and things like that. And then admission requirements may vary, and duration would be 1 and 2 years, especially if you are funded. And then students who are self-funded may also have, a longer period to complete their 1 or 2 year degrees. And yes, definitely there are chances to obtain financial aid. However, it's not as resourceful as the PhD degree. And then for the doctoral degree, now you have to really take a deeper understanding of your topics. And it's not the time to change your specialization, rather on the contrary, you basically build up on whatever the research you have had, whatever the interest you have developed, whatever practitioner experience you may bring, or whatever the academic background you may bring. And so that will be basically a culmination of your studies at the PhD level to prepare you for the academic levels, right? Also, at the graduate level, you don't need basically to outreach any professor, master's level, you don't need to outreach any professors. You can go to the admissions and start your admission process. Whereas for the PhD, it's very important that you research for professors, faculty, the research that they are leading, and an institution as well. Now, applying to PhD is very competitive, very competitive. And so, yes, definitely, you will have to go through a very rigorous preparation. It may take from 9 to 18 months before you get your message of congratulations, you have been awarded a scholarship, you're admitted to either graduate or graduate master's or graduate PhD degrees. And the major difference is, yes, it's very well financially aided program. Now, the interesting thing is that majority of the students do go to the master's degrees, and only 1.1% of the world's population currently study at the PhD level. United States may be one of the leaders as well by the number of the PhD, graduates that they get. I think they're under 2%, but it's still, much more than anywhere in the world. And of course, the number may vary by even the states, but definitely by the countries, let's say, around the world. As I said, 9 to 18 months before you want to go. Number one step is research your options, define your priorities. And this is what Dr. Walston has talked about. I just, highlighted some of the search engines for you. If you don't know where and how to get started, these are wonderful, aiding instruments for you to start looking for graduate schools, for majors, specializations, and things like that. But now let's move to the, funding sources. And as Chris earlier from the US Embassy mentioned, and we really enjoy wonderful relations with the embassy because, this is one of the major areas also for the US-Georgia strategic partnership in the educational sector. If you're looking for the fully funded master's programs, do look for the exchange programs. And here is the website where you can find more information about Fulbright graduate program, Fulbright scholar program, and others. And they do require J1 visa, which is an exchange student visa. But if you are pursuing an independent study, like, the students who come to Education USA, they say, we don't want to participate in exchange programs, or they participate in parallel, but they also want to find independently the opportunities. In this case, you are on an F1 visa type, like, student pursuing independent studies in the US would be on the F1 visa type. And then you have to find your sources to justify, right, your kind of visa. And there will be a number of the sources. such as U.S. university-based funding, so the funding that the university awards to you. There could be home country scholarships, host country scholarship if it's not U.S. and could be another country, private sponsor funding. There could be some loans and family contributions. So all of this together on the combination of this or one of these may qualify you after the admission to get your F1 visa. And just a quick note, I mean, how different they are. For J1 visa, which is an exchange student visa, most of the substantial institutional funding needs to be provided specifically for your educational program for the whole length. So if you are leading a 2-year program, the sponsor, in this case, the US government, has to demonstrate that it's fully funded for the 2 years, or not fully, then substantially, or whatever the amount. However, for F1 visa, for independent study, the source of financial support, any source is acceptable, I've just named them, and you must show support for the first year only, at least for the start. Then any employment, if you are on a J visa, should require a permit from the program sponsor. So whoever sponsors you should give you also a permit to work on or off campus. However, on the F1 visa, you don't need that kind of a permit because it's kind of, structured in that any student on F1 visa can work certain hours on campus, and we'll go into that. Also, you can take advantage of optional practical training, which is connected to your studies, and it could be during the studies where you can be pursuing your internship. It could be also a paid internship, but your experience, your training in that area counts as the number of the credits, and that's why it's called optional practical training. And then after the completion of your degree, you can also have the first one was the CPT, which is a curriculum-based training. And now after the completion, you have an optional practical training. And in terms of the STEM degree, you have extension by 2 more years. So altogether 3 years where you can stay in the US after graduation from your whatever master's degree, most popularly in Georgia, and kind of gain expertise, training in the area of specialization, and also kind of earn money if you have spent, some funds on your education. With the J1 visa, your students may be subject to 2-year home country presence requirement. With F1, you don't have that, which means that after completing 1 master's degree, you can also enroll in another, or you can, transition to the PhD program, and you don't have the kind of a requirement. We do have some experience with working with F1 visas, and I should just upfront note that we have been very fortunate to work with the US Embassy, US Consulate in this regard. Amid pandemic, there has been 0% decline in the visas for the students who applied. That said that, the students who had updated their I-20s, the document, which is, basically ensures your visa application, the programs that were hybrid, students were able to go, all of them. However, the students with their deferred semester, like, the students whose programs were not hybrid and they may be leaving now in January, we're working with the consulate because the consulate through the embassy has communicated with us. They're still doing expedited visa interviews, which is an emergency kind of a visa interviews. And most of them will be able, hopefully, to schedule their interviews and still process their deferred semester visa applications. What is this? Okay. Now, I wouldn't stop on here. However, very quick, highlight, in order to get funding, you basically represent value for the university as an international student, but as well as a student, right? And so these are some of the things that matters a lot when university considers you for funding. These are your academic achievements, motivation, leadership ability, adaptability, creativity, active social life, responsibility, non-academic achievements, impressive career. Those are some of the very important, very important aspects that you have to highlight in your financial aid, whether it's a scholarship letter or application or anything. And then you have to convert that assets and advantages that you have into the currency, and the currency will be reflected in your GPA, and the GPA will be definitely stated on the university websites. For some, 3.3 would be okay. For some would be 3.5 okay, but you have to individually check every institution for the GPA requirements. TOEFL, yes, it should be either TOEFL or IELTS. Many institutions are now open to Duolingo. For jury optional, I quite agree with Dr. Walston on his discussion about the jury and its future, that it's quite open. However, this year we have first-time students applying without jury and with jury. And some students have been responded by the institutions that, especially for the science and STEM majors, universities would welcome juries, although it may still be optional. So we follow these recommendations. However, in May, probably we'll have more information the way, the admissions will work for the students. Recommendations, personal achievements, and clear career goals. And this has been quite well stated. Now, what have worked on the graduate level? Now, if you look at the undergraduate level, you will, very often be asked, like, do you have need blind assistance? Do you have full ride for the undergraduate level? And there have been some positive answers and, some, variety of the answers in terms of the financial aid. But for the master's level, I think most of the scholarships that students may get will not be need-based per se, but will be merit scholarships, merit fellowships, right? And this will probably be towards your tuition rather than living expenses. And most of the supplementary type of the assistance that you will get will be your research, teaching, and graduate assistantship support. And please do look out for the websites, because it's also clearly stated there what kind of support is available for international students. Sometimes universities will state that research assistantships have been reserved, especially for the students who are involved in the research and mostly in the STEM field, rather than students who are pursuing MA degrees or things like that. And the merit-based scholarships, you will read that institutional funding may be limited to international students. However, the students who qualify and have outstanding results in GPA or whatever, GRE or TOEFL, are still eligible. And therefore, we do have a lot of success stories with the Georgian students who received the combination of these assistantships, scholarships, tuition waivers, or where international student tuition have been equalized to in-state tuition, and that also brings down the expenses, right? So these are some of the instruments that we have used and our students have used in order to fund their, especially the master's level studies. For the PhDs, of course, most of them come with the full tuition funding, and there could be also differences in the type of additional support, whether it's a living stipend or some extra insurance or other expenses. Now we came back to what can you do on campus and how much you can earn on campus. And students on F1 visa can work on campus jobs, and they can work 20 hours per week. However, they can work full-time during their vacation, whether it's on campus or off campus. And that's also a support for the students, because during the summer, they can also earn some money that they will put forward towards their graduate studies next semester or things like that. We did talk about CPT a little and OPT. If you have questions, I would be more than happy to answer them later. And this is how we basically present what is financial need. It's a combination of certain things, it's a cost of attendance, family contribution, and then expected family contribution can be anything. Could be like maybe your private sponsor funding, could be, your savings, or it could be, home country, assistance. And then loans. Many students come and ask, like, can we get a loan in the US? And that's a very, very kind of a complex issue, because most of the students would not be able to get loans in the US, because most of them would need like American co-signatory, somebody who can kind of stand for them, let's say, in the bank guarantees. However, some of the students have been able to get institutional loans. So the loans that are provided by the universities, these are institutional loans, and they have been successful to take those loans, and they have very low interest rates as well. And then work and study opportunities. Now, again, the combination of the certain things will take you somewhere. And then one of the luckiest thing, I believe, the fortunate thing that we have is that Georgian government, through its agency, International Education Center, does provide scholarships for study abroad, whether it's US or EU. There are a number of the programs that are country-specific partnerships, or independent study seekers, whether it's doctoral programs or master's level programs. And now I've just put a slide from their website, which represents a report from 2019. And I'm very happy to see that United States stands here second in a row in the number of the students that have been funded for study in the US. And I believe it's mostly for master's and PhD levels. And basically, just consider your deadlines, do your research early, because everything is possible. US institutions are very open. They really love communication with the students, and you always get answered about the questions. And, be also very forward-coming with the questions you have, whether it's like, what kind of sources you rely upon? Are you applying for the government funding and need extension in your financial consideration, or the deadline is approaching already to make your commitment, let's say, to the master's program, but your scholarship is not yet decided. There have been numerous cases where US institutions have been very open to such extensions, or have been very loyal in kind of giving time to the students to find the best opportunities that they can. And therefore start early, the communication, putting together application, negotiations and things like that. And there are several things that I've just, put out, which you definitely need to consider before applying. And yes, we would be more than happy to help you individually. We would be more than happy to come back to you if you sign up for specific webinar for specific topic, whether it's how to do recommendations or how to do statements of purpose, or any topic for your choice. And we have two basically social media pages, one for Center for International Education. If you are looking for like a broader opportunities beyond the United States, you can message us and we'll definitely get back to you. And then the other one is Education USA Georgia, where we specifically respond to your request, whether it's individual consultations or advisement or any other inquiries you may have with regard to your questions or application or financial aid resources or any of the other. Well, that has been short, I believe, for the sake of the time. This is our website, educationusa.state.gov. Please do visit our website. You will find it very useful. There is a financial aid table, which also lists all the financial aid newest information that US schools provide, and you can just search it by state or by the degree, and you'll find out what universities have what type of funding. You can be your departing point in making your first steps while researching graduate programs, whether it's master's or PhD. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very interesting and helpful. Sorry the time is short. We will go to questions and discussion now. The agenda said 10. We typically go to 10:30. If people need to leave, that'll be fine. But I think that we can ask Dr. Sergaladze to lead the discussion and questions for those that are interested. Dolly, hopefully you can stay on, and Ed, you can stay on until 10:30 if there's the interest. We will check with the speakers and make the presentations and the recording available assuming that the speakers agree. So Nodar.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank both presenters for their great presentation. We enjoyed a lot and we learned a lot. And I tried to collect a couple of questions from audience, and let me ask Dr. Walston the first question. Although the Dali partially covered this question, but question is like that. For the US source of funding and fellowship support, is there any difference for in-state students, out-of-state, and international one? And what portion of the this fellowship support is available for foreign students like Georgian? This is the first question. Ed, can you answer, please?
Sure, I think so. And to the to Walt's question, yes, of course, please make the slides available to anyone who's interested. Yeah, I think the key way in which in-state, out-of-state international students are treated differently in terms of funding is tuition. And if tuition coverage is not part of a financial support package, that can make a significant difference. Any international student is treated as out-of-state by a public university, and the differences can be $10,000 or more per academic year, maybe even more. So it is less an issue as far as the way you frame the question, fellowship support. So if there are research assistantships, teaching assistantships, and even institutional fellowships, those should be available to students of any residency status. The exceptions are the US government fellowships to support research students. And some of these are very generous fellowships. We call them pre-doctoral fellowships. In students in master's programs or PhD students can get them. They're kind of the gold standard of a graduate student support, either from the National Science Foundation, from the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense. So the federal government does have a lot of fellowships that I guess obviously only go to US citizens. But other sources of financial support wouldn't discriminate. And then tuition, yes, if tuition is not part of a financial support package, the difference between being a resident and a non-resident at a public university can be large.
Thank you. Another question was that what happens if the PhD student cannot fit within the 5 or 6 years of his study, and is there any other way to support their research in that field after 5 or 6 years once the support is over?
Yes, so the time limits for financial support in a PhD program are really the institutions, the universities. There's nothing that prevents a faculty member from continuing to support a student, say beyond their 6th year, with grant funds and so on. That it's a situation that's everybody involved would like to avoid, where something has slowed down progress to the degree the relationship remains intact. They're doing productive work together. Grant funds can continue to support a student, but we're really going to learn more about this and institutions' reaction and faculty's reaction, because so many graduate students have been slowed in their progress toward their degree, toward completing a dissertation in 2020, and that's going to continue into next year. So you may see, I think, some loosening of these time restrictions under kind of an accommodation of everything that's gone wrong in the last year. But more typically, it's just a situation to be avoided. Everybody is motivated to see students complete their degree in a timely fashion. That those cases where somebody is now beyond 6 years into a 7th and 8th, I would say more often than not, it's because somebody has begun working in a job and is earning a proper salary and winds up paying for these things themselves.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I think I should just add an encouraging comment here that if you look at the degree completion statistics, which I have read, is that especially for the science fields, there is almost double higher the degree of the completion of the degrees versus to the humanities. And the statistics suggest that about 35 to 40% students in PhD degrees in humanities do complete their degrees, where the percent for the STEM degree enrolled in the PhD studies it's about like 75 to 80%, which is really very high. And they suggest that students are very, in a very rigorous program, very structured, disciplined way. And I believe, that also is one of the, important encouragement factor for the students, especially, in STEM.
Nodar, could I say one other thing about foreign tuition? Many of you know that our PhD program in chemistry is supplemented by the Georgian government to offset the extra cost of tuition for a foreign student. And we're hoping to expand that to other fields in STEM at SDSU. So we'll have a presentation on this in a future mini course, but that then makes the cost to San Diego State equivalent to a in-state student, with the differential being funded by another source, and makes it easier to accept more Georgian students because it isn't an extra cost to the program. But we'll hear more about that later.
Okay, one remark came from a participant, and maybe would be a good topic for the next session to discuss the structure of PhD programs at San Diego State universities. Although the Dr. Walston just described and showed in his slide how many PhD programs the SDSU have, but it was very brief description, and would be good to hear more detailed information about specific programs. Another question came about this possibility, and I understand this is like from the Georgian PhD student. In Georgia, we have some kind of mobility students. One student can change their disciplines even PhD level. And is there any mobility between research programs if person decides to shift their research area? So how it affects this duration, 5 or 6 year restriction, and so on.
Yeah, no, so I think that's an excellent suggestion about for students that are curious about the PhD programs at San Diego State. Maybe we can have directors of the programs come speak briefly. Now it's really information providing, but it's also an active recruiting effort. I mean, know that there are excellent students in Georgia, and they can give more detail about how the program works. It's beyond just the structure. I think what I described in terms of coursework and advancing sort of comprehensive exams and those things kind of applies to our programs accurately enough, but there's so much more detail they can provide. As far as shifting, yeah, there are certainly within programs, there are students that come in under an arrangement that shifts, and they end up working for a different faculty member in a different lab. These are usually not not high anxiety situations if it makes sense to everybody that someone moves. And other times there can be hard feelings, I suppose. And we've even had students and faculty switching across programs. The computational science PhD program that I described is very interdisciplinary. So it has faculty that are participating in it from the sciences as well as from engineering and from math. So there are students that could be in that program, but there are faculty who can be contributing to that program or to others. And so there's some fluidity between PhD programs. It's disruptive, and it tends to slow a student's progress if they start down one path and have to, take a couple of steps back and start in another program. But it's not out of the question.
It's the exception rather than the rule, right?
Absolutely, not a super common thing. It's not a sign that everything's going great, but at other times it just makes more sense. It realizes the way a student's research is progressing, it would make more sense for it to be in a different lab or in computational science instead of engineering, for example. But it is unusual.
Another question came from the faculty members of one of the universities. So does SDSU have any international joint PhD program or joint other PhD program with other universities?
Walt, you've thought about that one for the longest. Why don't you answer it?
Sorry, Nodar, I'm not as sure that I understand the question. So we have all of our PhDs are joint with, as Ed explained, with other institutions in California. We've worked to set up truly joint PhD programs with other countries, and I think that's why Ed kicked the ball to me. And particularly, we've worked with the Ministry of Education in Mexico to establish a true joint program with institutions within the federal research system in Mexico, particularly in Baja California. There is a lot of enthusiasm, but also, as Ed indicated, a fair amount of bureaucracy and legislative oversight. So we haven't done it yet, but we've moved in that direction. It's something that I'm a huge proponent of and would like to see move forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was referring to. Is I know Walt for a long time has had an interest in developing joint doctoral programs with institutions in Mexico and elsewhere. So far, we haven't figured out the bureaucracy, as he says.
So we got fairly far with several institutions in Mexico in terms of joint interest and agreement. Also with Aix-Marseille University in France, and with an institution or two in Italy. So we've made, it's something we would like to move forward on. I would like to move forward on.
I don't know if Christina Alfaro is still on the call, but building relationships with universities in other countries is certainly possible, and we do. And that goes to visiting students, visiting scholars, having SDSU faculty serve on master's thesis committees or doctoral dissertation committees for those universities. Those things can be arranged, with a good agreement, memorandum of understanding, kind of establishing how it would work. It's the actual joint administration of a program that we struggle with, but these other relationships we absolutely should be in a good position to do and do.
Yeah, and I should say that for the master's programs, we do have international joint master's degrees. So we've done it there, and also, as Ed just said, we can functionally do it in a institution manner, but the degree would not be a joint degree, but the input and scientific oversight and project oversight can be formalized with another country or institution.
And I think this is the last question. It came. So what happens if the person cannot defend the doctoral dissertation, and can he or she get the master's degree only, or what's the situation for that? If the person cannot get the PhD degree out of this.
Yeah. So it's a very common design feature in American PhD programs that at a milestone in the PhD program, a master's degree is awarded or is available to be awarded. I have one of those. I entered a PhD program in the 1990s without a master's degree, and after 18 months in the PhD program, they said, oh yeah, because you passed these qualifying exams, you now have a master's degree. And they don't require doing anything that you weren't already supposed to be doing in the early phase of the PhD program. So that's the University of California campuses have this as the standard design, for example, that there's this embedded master's degree that more marks a milestone in the doctoral program than anything else. It might vary. Our joint programs have that feature, but it's a little bit more complex and might require a student to do something in addition to their normal PhD program path. But the capturing of a master's degree along the way to a PhD is a desirable enough feature that we certainly see it a lot. And in some places, it's built in. And it does provide a doctoral student at year, say 2, with another decision point, right? Like I've earned a master's degree here. I've still got a ways to go, and writing a doctoral dissertation is going to be a huge undertaking, and it's presumably both personally and professionally going to be very rewarding. But it is an opportunity to say, my job opportunities my employment opportunities are also pretty good right now, and it's an opportunity to exit. But as Dolly points out, in STEM programs, the completion rates are really quite high. I think that potential off ramp from the PhD program is exercised more in the social sciences and humanities and maybe even the health sciences. But it's certainly a common feature, yeah.
One question to Dali. Dali, do you know any statistics? What percentage of Georgian students return back after completion of their graduate studies?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't have such a statistics because we don't basically compile the statistics. Normally, it will be probably the immigration services, or I don't know, we don't get access to it. But I can tell you, it really varies depending on the level, not in terms of the return, but in terms of the wait time for the return. Because for 60% of the Georgian students study at undergraduate level, and the wait time for them to come back is between 4 to 8 years. I mean, they have to complete their undergraduate studies, then they take advantage of 1 or 2 years of OPT, then they transfer to master studies. So it may take them between 4 to 8 years basically to come back. And that doesn't mean that in this 8 years, they're not coming back. They're just on the track to complete whatever the pursuit they have in the, educational field. However, for the master's, it's more visible because master is a professional degree. You complete it in a year or two, and then you come back. Most of the students in master's degrees are either exchange program participants or I have to name again International Education Center, award recipients, and all of these, programs come with a, sticker attached to it that they have to come back, spend some time in their country. And therefore, I believe there will be a higher rate of return for the graduate students, whereas the longer wait time for the undergraduate students. This is as much as I can say.
Thank you. And I think finally, everyone wants to have these presentations from the presenters. If you can send us, we can share it among the participants. Halil, would you like to add something at the end?
Yeah, I would like to, it was very interesting. I would like to thank the presenters, both at Walston as well as Daniel Omereki, and also the comments from Chris. And I would like to thank all of you that stick around for 2.5 hours. There is still almost 100 people here. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, STSU Georgia is ready to provide local support. So if you need to get more information, or if you want us to point you in the right direction, please contact Anna Tonikiani. She put her contact information in the chat, and we can send it to you also separately. And we're here to support you or your graduate students that would like to pursue graduate studies in STEM fields in San Diego or elsewhere. So please feel free to contact us if you have some prospective students, or if you'd like to take advantage of this yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, and especially the presenters. Excellent set of presentations. And to the participants, we still have almost 100 people online, which I'm impressed by at 10:30 at night. We will do our best. We'll get the presentations and the recording available. We also will have another 6 or 7 presentations, maybe not quite that many, but we have a number of presentations that we'll have this year. And so look forward to updates on upcoming mini courses. And we'll try and do one on the programs at San Diego State, an overview as suggested by the directors. So thank you all. Thanks for attending and presenting and hanging on to this late hour. And we will see you in the future.
And happy holidays.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, bye. Thank you for everybody. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
So,
Goodbye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
good night.
How are you?
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.